Demon fans, and welcome back to the Demonland podcast. My name is Andy, and the D's and Cozzy heeded the words of the late, great Neil Danaher and played on, prevailing in a heart-stopping thriller at the MCG as D's fans delighted in the breaking of the hearts of every Magpies fan in the stadium. Joining me tonight to dissect a win for the ages is George. Good evening, George.
Good evening, Andy. Good evening to Binman. Good evening to all our listeners. Is there nothing better than beating Collingwood by 1 point? 8 points will do. We'll take that. But is there nothing better than the feeling after that game? That's the eternal enemy is vanquished again, and what a way to do it.
I think one of our questions, someone said it in there, just that it was great to beat them because they had to stay there until the bitter end. Absolutely great. And for once, when you win like that, I don't care if the trains are packed or anything like that. Bring it on. Also joining us tonight to break down all the stats from the game is B-Man. Good evening, B-Man.
Good evening, Andy. Good evening, George. Good evening, Demonlanders. And all is well with the world. It's remarkable. I was reflecting on the way home how many times I've been to the MCG, particularly over the last few years, and we've lost by 2 points, 3 points, 1 point.
Yeah,
and I've thought to myself, the difference of a few points, imagine the tone of this show if we'd lost that game or, every mistake would be suddenly earth-shattering. Every sort of reflection would be we're hopeless. We can never do anything. Our season's finished. We get a goal and win by.
Yeah. So if Degoe had kicked that goal, we might not have won the game. We could still could have, but we might not have won. They might have just iced it then and there.
Totally.
And then it changes everything for tonight. That's for
changes everything for tonight, for this week. I didn't even watch the shows last week because I couldn't be bothered with all the wrong analysis. And, so at least I can do that. I haven't watched any this week, but I've watched the replay once. I'll do that again. But I ended up going. I wasn't going to go. And shout out to Demonland Poster, and I had a ticket in a Collingwood members area, and I was one out Demon fan in the middle of the Collingwood members area, and it was one of the more memorable days I've had at the footy, I have to say. And that last quarter, I was swinging between feeling sick, and I just felt like I wrote on Demonland. I had these waves of existential dread sort of coursing through me in that last quarter, and I was sitting directly. I was at the Shane Warne stand at the Punt Road end, and sort of slightly in the right hand pocket as you're looking towards the city. And so I had a completely straight down the line view of that Degoe kick. It was about 2 minutes 50 to go or something.
Yeah. Oh, it's in the last 2 minutes. Yeah.
And I was like, I was positive he was going to kick it, in large part because I was winding up the crowd the crowd around me in the Collingwood base, something chronic, and I got into their heads right from the 4 minutes in after Cozzy kicked his second goal. He's at the very first bounce. I'm not sure what happened after that, but the very first bounce, Dacos was on Cozzy or Cozzy was on Dacos, one of the two. They were on each other. And after his second goal, Cozzy kicked his second goal, I yelled out, Dacos, that's your man. He's already kicked 2 on you. And it was on for young and old. And like the Collingwood fans were going ballistic. And every time Cos went near the ball, or made a mistake, Cos, and they were all sort of hoo-haring. And I kept on having to yell out, listen, I don't want to get into anything here, but he's Latrell. He's Kasaya.
Yeah.
Yes, they look similar. Yes, they've got long sleeve jumpers. Yes, they've both got double digits with 3 in them, but they're different people. So stop saying Cos whenever Latrell goes near the ball. But that Degoe thing, I'd just given it to everyone when Cos taken that intercept mark, because it was a beautiful bit of play. You'd almost could see him, how quickly he read what was happening. It was just magic. And I was giving it to him, and people were, and then he didn't even make the distance.
But what's with Cos and those type of kicks? He did it against St Kilda last year in Alice Springs, remember? He just went quickly with it, and he hardly got any height.
That's the 5th time he's done that.
Yeah, so I don't maybe just drop punt.
off the
it went
left,
up
off,
the
play
off
on.
the left, off the left foot around the corner. He can't hit him.
I don't know what he was doing. And he didn't make the distance. It was marked. It went up the other end not long after that, and De Goey took that mark, and everyone was just giving it to me, like just absolutely ripping into me. And I had a joke all ready to go, and I didn't have the wherewithal to do it. I was going to say, should I McStay or should I De Goey before he kicked the ball? But
that would have gone over the heads. That would have gone. That was a wasted joke on Collingwood fans. That is a wasted joke.
Well, and but I didn't want to I lost my bottle and didn't want to put myself in the frame in case he missed it. So I was thrilled when he missed it. And it was a really anxious last couple of minutes, obviously, because there were some heroic bits of footy. Langford, obviously. Yep. But the bit that, just in case it doesn't sort of come up in our conversation, one of the things I most loved, so Langford's run-down tackle of Dacos was brilliant. But also what was important in that play, Dacos delayed a kick because we'd covered the corridor. So he looked inboard to go inboard. And that delay, because we defensively, I thought we were really good defensively, created the opportunity for the tackle. But the bit of play I wanted to highlight was Colt under pressure.
Yeah, at the end. He didn't blaze away. Yep.
He didn't blaze away, and he nailed a kick. I thought initially it was Bowie, but it ended up going to Bowie.
Whoever he kicked it to Bowie,
Yeah. But it was under pressure, and he just needed to hit that ball. If that
he thought about it as well. Like he was going to go long and no. It's good to see, and I think he's really blossoming in that defensive position.
Yeah, he's looking like a defender now.
Yeah, looking like a defender, and in that moment,
didn't panic. In a panic state, in a panic when you have every right to panic.
Yeah, and as George noted last week, it was the perfect example of what George was saying about the intersection of fatigue and technique. He's got an excellent kicking technique, a really strong kicking technique, unlike Windsor, who drops.
Well, we're going to talk about what Windsor's a bit later, but
and under pressure, late in the game, obviously exhausted, under immense pressure, off half a step, he nails that because of his partly his decision making, but almost certainly because of how strong his technique is. He was able to do that, and I thought his leadership actually was really, really impressive. And he did the job. I thought he might go to Dacos, but he did the job on Schultz and really kept Schultz sort of, he's exactly the player that I've been banging on we'd struggle with. Yeah. And he really had no impact on the game. Huge credit to Colt. Well, obviously, Langford. It's just
like Colt, Bowie, Howes have really stepped up in the absence of not having Salem, Lindsay. Well, Lindsay's still young, but,
May.
He's that May obviously not there. He's a keeper, but I'm talking about those smaller players have stepped up.
Absolutely,
really needed that type of player. There
was actually in the Langford rundown tackle. It was highlighted on the couch in the background. If you look at that in the background, Bowie is directing Turner and Howes to go into the middle of the ground. Because while we were going to move forward, and we subsequently did, and Cozzy missed a shot
and that's
horribly.
Another one. He should have kicked that one. That's the one he should have nailed as well.
Yeah, but Bowie had already worked out you've got to cover the outlet, which with only less than a minute to go at that point. So when Collingwood got the point and the kick out, guess who was on the end of the kick out? That was Turner, because Bowie had already sent him there before the ball had even left that area. So it was a great. It just showed how aware Bowie is of setting up the proper structures. While everybody was busy jumping up and down about the success of the tackle, Bowie's still concentrating on winning the game and making sure that they didn't have a second chance, which is exactly what they did.
That was interesting, George. That kick was from Josh Dacos, and it was a mongrel of a kick. Like he just didn't kicked it to a 2-on-1. It was exactly the sort of situation. If it was a D's and we were unpacking that now, we would be bemoaning, panicking under pressure, kicking to a 2-1 contest. Brilliant bit of work by Sparrow to get the ball off De Goey, and then of course,
and also he also didn't just blaze away and kick in. He looked out to get it to Langdon.
Got to Langdon.
And it was a beautiful kick.
I don't know. I don't know about you guys, but I could not believe it. Like, I probably could, but it was like I was yelling out. I heard Lever interviewed after the game, completely hoarse, like I was. I'm still a bit hoarse. And he was asked about Cossie's decision to play on. And I was screaming, and he said he was screaming.
Well, everyone was. Petty-wise, everyone
was screaming.
Yeah, he should have soaked up the 30 seconds, but he probably wouldn't have kicked the goal. I think he needed to play on and kick that goal.
Well, then there would have only been 10 seconds left and almost no chance. But it actually was it'd be fascinating to hear actually King's conversation with him, because King was asked about it in the presser and he said, oh, well, Cos doing Cos things. I'm not going to tell Cos how to play. And
I think he might.
Yeah,
really?
In
that stage of the game, you've got to take the 30 seconds.
40 seconds, kicks a point and then he goes back. That's more than enough time to bring the ball end to end. But he kicked it and that was it, wasn't it? It was just he was irrepressible. And of course, because I was doing the Cos conflict show all thing, it was just like the icing on a just magnificent cake. And the other highlight for me, I don't know if we'll touch on it, but the other highlight was that I just stood up and big arms in the air in the middle of the Collingwood. It was Cross's goal.
Yeah, that was. I actually think maybe the tackle actually helped.
Yeah, Pendlebury helped him out with that one.
It just the trajectory of it. It was beautiful.
Yeah.
And the other bit of play that I loved from Cross was it was like maybe at the 20-minute mark of the last quarter, a mark he took on the boundary on the Members side.
Great.
If he didn't mark that ball was loose. There was pies. They would have brought it back inside 50. I thought that was two excellent efforts. Obviously, the goal though. Someone said. That was lucky. That wasn't a lucky goal. He jinked back inside, got on his right foot under pressure. That was just magnificent, and right through the centre as well. And for a day,
I wasn't saying it was lucky.
Filled with errors. Yeah. Like there was so many shocking errors. It was a error in game. There were some magnificent goals. So one credit where it's due. Dacos's goal was just unbelievable. De Goey's running banana goal was unbelievable, but hard to top Langford's goal and Cross's goal either. But although, having said that, that goal from Dacos was incredible. He had so little space in order to kick that and right up on the boundary line.
This is not the Dacos show, so we'll move on from that. All right, let's get into...
He is an impressive footballer, there's no doubt about it. Bloody hell, he can kick the footy.
Each week, I invite our loyal listeners to support the podcast by leaving us a 5-star review and a comment on Apple Podcasts, and we truly appreciate your feedback. And as a token of our gratitude, we give a well-deserved shout-out to those who take the time to share their reviews. And Engie writes, love the show, by far the antidote for a poor loss or the icing on the cake for a famous victory. Andy, George and B-Man do an exemplary job of letting us know the whys, the hows and should-have-beens for our beloved D's performance from the weekend just gone. Just wish we all had a little gnome in the red and blue sitting on our bars for good luck. And I actually know Engie. G'day, Engie. That little red and blue gnome that he mentioned sitting on a bar for good luck was very real. In fact, it was a garden gnome painted in Melbourne colours that lived for decades in my parents' house. To this day, I have no idea where it came from, and maybe we bought it, maybe someone gifted it to us, or maybe it simply materialised one day like some benevolent football spirit. It would have been sometime in the late 80s or early 90s, and it took up residence on the bar in our dining room in suburban Melbourne. And now, before you get the wrong idea, the bar in the dining room makes us sound very on brand for D's family. For D's fans, like a family of MCC members sipping sherry before dinner, and the truth was far less glamorous. But there it sat, perched above us all, wearing its little demon colours and quietly plotting our misery. And at some point, and nobody can remember exactly when, that gnome became a bad luck charm, and the actual reason has probably been lost to history. Most likely it was one of those years when we were crap or had a run of some bad losses, which admittedly doesn't narrow down the timeline very much. But like all long-suffering D supporters, we needed something to blame, and deep down we all believe that the club was cursed, and if you're going to blame a curse, why not blame an inanimate object and assign it some mystical powers? And footy fans, of course, are ridiculous creatures. Some of us, won't wash a lucky jumper. Others refuse to sit in a different seat at the footy. Some wear the same pair of undies each week. And others panic if they see the wrong team's scarf when they first arrive at a train station. But one of my family's poison, amongst many, was this damn garden gnome, and that little red and blue menace sat on the bar year after year, silently absorbing our misery from every heartbreaking loss, every failed season, every shattered hope, and it became part of our family's folklore. But what Engie doesn't know is that every great curse story has a final chapter, and a chapter where that curse is broken. So everyone knows about the Norm Smith curse, but what few people don't know is how that curse was actually broken. And in the years after its reign of terror on our bar, the gnome was relocated to a study. And yes, a study is still very on brand for a Melbourne supporter. And there it sat in its new lair on a shelf, watching and waiting. And then came 2021, and one day in that study, a member of the next generation of our Demonland clan was present, and we still don't know who that unlikeliest of heroes was, and no one has ever confessed. But on that fateful day, the gnome was knocked from its perch and it crashed onto the floor. It was carpeted, of course, but the tip of the little gnome's hat snapped clean off, and blood, or more accurately, some plaster was spilled that day, and the curse was broken. And for decades, that gnome had sat untouched. Then suddenly it was wounded, and the D's would go on then to win the next 7 matches, culminating in the breaking of a 57-year premiership drought. There's coincidence, and maybe not, but perhaps the curse didn't end when Melbourne trailed by 19 points midway through the third quarter of the grand final. Perhaps it wasn't when Max Gorm was unceremoniously dumped into the boundary turf by Caleb Daniel, drawing blood and somehow igniting the most extraordinary 93-point turnaround football has ever seen. And perhaps the curse had always been broken months earlier in a suburban Melbourne study when an anonymous family member accidentally sent a demon-coloured garden gnome tumbling from its perch. Perhaps the true hero of 2021 has never received the recognition that they deserve. So, Engie, there is a postscript to the greatest story never told, and the gnome is broken, the curse was broken, and somewhere on a new shelf in suburban Melbourne sits the shattered relic that finally set the Melbourne Football Club free. So that's the story of the gnome. So, Engie, you finally get to hear what happened to it. And, I'll see you next time.
Can you buy a new one every
Gold
year
Coast
and ceremoniously smash it?
Well, I don't know. You can't just summon a malevolent spirit. Let's keep those reviews coming throughout 2026. And if you leave us a 5-star review and a comment on our Apple podcast, we will give you a shout out on the show. And don't forget to check out Big Man Stats Files podcast, which drops every Friday. It's the companion pod to this show. And Big Man gives us a deep dive into the numbers behind the game and the stats explained why the D's dominated and why things didn't click. And he reviews the previous match as well as previewing the upcoming one. So keep an eye out for that in Demonland podcast feed every Friday. And you can follow us across Facebook, Instagram, and X. And if you want to leave feedback, send through a question, just share your thoughts on the show and jump into our weekly podcast thread or send us a DM. And don't worry, we won't read out your full name on the air. And you can find the Demonland podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcast. Just search for Demonland Podcast. And don't forget to hit subscribe. And if you want to join in on the conversation with fellow D supporters, head on over to demonland.com, sign up for free and jump into the forums with fellow Demon fans from across Australia and around the world. And if you want to call into the show live tonight, give us a buzz on 0486 387 929. That's 0486 387 929. If you're listening live on your phone through demonland.com, just hit the call button on the player and it should open up straight into your phone app. You can also call that number during the week. Leave us a voicemail, and those voicemails go directly to voicemail, so no awkward conversations with an actual human. And our chat room is back. If you want to listen live and you want to join in on the show, just click the chat button on the podcast player. You need to be signed up and logged into Demonland to participate, but jump in with your questions and comments. We'll do our best to keep our eye on it throughout the night. You can catch the Demonland podcast live every Monday night. We'll be back at 8 p.m. next week. And that's it. Big Man, time for your condensed version of the stats files. Yes, George.
Yeah, shout out to Terence Langley, who's in Dublin. He's just joined us through the chat room, talking about his little episode in Ireland during the game where nobody knew what the hell he was doing.
That's a common theme for people who say that they watch the game overseas and they're having their neighbours wondering why someone at 2 a.m. is going off their chops. But yeah.
Luke Terran says, I was watching the whole game from the library at Trinity College in Dublin, so I was not hoarse at the end of the game, but there was silent arms in the air on numerous occasions. Some of the Paddies and Colleens were wondering what the heck I was doing.
Well, Big Man, if you want to get into your stats files, don't forget to check out Big Man's stats files later on in the week where he'll preview the upcoming game.
And unlike the stats file where I've showed no discipline at all, I'm just about to put my countdown timer on 10 minutes, bang. So here we go. So key numbers. I thought it was interesting, the average age and experience of this game. Their average age was 28.3 and a game's experience averaging 144.5. That's a pretty high average, isn't it?
I heard last week Collingwood actually don't have a player on the field under the age of 23.
Yeah, it's just amazing, actually. Well, how old is Buller? I made a joke in there. The thing is that he should play for us, and only one person seemed to have got it. But anyway, you're disrupting me. 9:28, George. That was deliberate, wasn't it? So our average age was 25.9, and our average experience was 108.8. And Tommy McDonald probably put that up a fair bit because it was 95 when the squad was when the squad was announced. Yeah, so. I thought it was a really gutsy win. This bit of data jumped out before the game. I thought it was a gutsy win, and a lot of credit must go to the high performance team. We'll talk a bit about that a bit later with one of the questions. I thought we did our very best to be in our optimal shape for this game, and clearly targeted it. And we ran out the game better than the Pies did, but nonetheless, from my perspective, we were clearly fatigued. So to me, that makes the win even more meritorious because we really, really fought through that fatigue and really kept going. But there's evidence of a gutsy win. Before this game, the Pies had won 4 of 5 matches when they led at 3/4 time this season. While we'd just where the D's had won just 1 of 6 matches when we trailed at the final change. So that's a really terrific turnaround from that perspective. I have to be honest and say that when they sort of got a bit of a run on in that third quarter, I was really feeling sick in my guts and thought I was worried that we wouldn't have the run in the legs to get over the top of them. There was a fleeting moment in the last quarter where I felt similar, but then it balanced up. It was really, an arm wrestle. And in some ways, I mentioned the average age and average experience is, in some ways, whilst we had 11 players under 50 games in the lineup, having so many older players probably equalises it a little bit in terms of fatigue. But they're definitely fatigued as well at the moment. No doubt about that. Their bye is this week. I thought it was really interesting the way King and McRae dealt with with Dacos and Cos respectively. Both of them let them go pretty much in the first half. In terms of Cos, he had 17 disposals and 2 goals in the first half, and McRae said enough is enough and sent Ed Allen to him. He did a good job. 16 minutes into the last quarter, Cos, after tearing it up in the first half, it only had 4 disposals at the 16-minute mark in the second half. But then he got off the chain. And in the last sort of 14, 15 minutes of the last quarter, he had 7 more disposals, which included a shot at goal from 30 metres that didn't make the distance, an out of full under little pressure that we were talking about before, and of course, as we were talking about the match-winning goal after inexplicably playing on with 40 seconds to go. And, that's one, it was, Ed Allen did a good job to reduce his impact, but just shows the class, the best players standing up. That first half, I have to say, was just terrific watching two of the best footballers in the AFL playing such magnificent football. However, Nick Dacos got off the chain in that first half as well. He was asked about it, King in the presser, and I guess it's always a bit of a, do you put time into Nick Dacos when the scores are level at half time? Like, what are you losing if the scores are at level at half time? But I heard Steele interviewed or a comment about it. I heard tail end of Steele talking, but that he took responsibility to quell his influence. Now I'm not sure whether King sent Steele to him or Steele put his hand up or whatever. Whatever that was, I thought great leadership by Steele because he really, really did a good job quelling Nick Dacos's influence. So he was prolific in that first half. In that first half, Dacos had 22 disposals, 7 inside 50s, 5 score involvements and 2 goals. In that second half when the game was on the line, and I have to say this was, leaving aside the sort of Neil Danaher aspect of the day and the King's birthday and the tradition, was actually a super critical game for both teams, but even more so for the Pies. It's really hard to see them with their points making that top 10 now. It really is going to be a challenge for them. In the second half, when the game was on the line, Steele really, really did a great job quelling Nick Dacos. In the second half, he only had 13 disposals. He had 0 inside 50s after having 7 in the first half, 0 goals, and only 2 more score involvements after having 5 in the first half. So terrific job by Steele. Really great leadership. Leads him into the player ratings. Cozzy, he was I'd be interested to hear what your guys' thoughts are after this. But actually, yeah, Cozzy was a deserved winner of the Neil Danaher medal with different criteria this year that was more about sort of attitude and contribution and those things. But a fantastic performance by Coz. 18.4 was his player rating. Standout, I've talked about this before, and I'll say it again. The last player that I can recall who is so ballistic at winning the footy and also has such elite level, just unbelievable skills is Lee Matthews. That's who Cozzy really reminds me of, the way he's playing. So of his 18.4 player rating points, his equity points, 8 of those points were winning the ball, so winning his own footy, but a team high 10.5 points for how he used the ball. Compare that to negative 6.5 equity points for how Van Rooyen used the ball. He really, his kicking was terrible, actually. For such a good kick, Van Rooyen's kicking was really disappointing. But terrific performance by Coz. Bailey Fritsch had a cracking game after 2 weeks where he had been poor, 18.2. And interestingly, his equity points was pretty well evenly spread across ball winning and ball use. 6.7 equity points for ball winning, which is great for Fritter, who's not a known sort of contested ball winner, and 8.2 for how he used the ball. Really sort of big... really big kudos. I have to say I'm super impressed with Jake Lever this season. I thought this was just such a fantastic game. His leadership is really terrific. 17.1 player rating points, his highest rating game that I can recall for a long time.
Took some ripper marks as well.
Oh, he took some beautiful marks. And the Pies fans around me were going, just like we would if we kept on kicking it to Howes, which I thought we did a good job of not doing, except couple of times when he outpointed Fritter. But what jumped out at me actually was his ball use. Of his 17.1 player rating points, only 3.4 of them were for how he used the ball. Jake Lever said that's not terrible. Fritter, by comparison, was 8.2. What was great though was how he won the ball. 10.2 of his 17 player rating points were he got from how he won the footy. Kay Chandler kept his incredible season going. More great leadership from the young fella. He was our 4th highest rated player, 17 rating points. His equities points were split across ball winning and ball use. Jack Steele, as I mentioned, he rounded out our top 5, 16.8 player rating points, much higher than I would have guessed. If you were going to ask me what his rating was before I read it, I wouldn't have guessed anywhere near 16.8. He got 7.4 of those rating points in the last quarter when the game was there to be won. So, fantastic leadership from Steele. How lucky are we to have drafted him in this year? This one was interesting because again, if you'd asked me straight after the game, maybe now it's coloured, I would have had Harvey Langford as the most impactful, most influential player on the ground. He was our 6th highest rated player, 16.6. 9 of his points were how he used the footy, 6.4 of how he won it. I thought he was just terrific. I see you nodding. George, what did you think of his game?
Well, all round it was just fantastic. It's easy to forget he's 19 years old.
Yeah, Yeah.
When he's on that left foot, as we saw in this game, his ability to drill it through the goals from ridiculous angles, being quite deliberate as well, is fantastic. But if you look at it, also there's a couple of other events. I think it was JVR's goal that he got was because Harvey Langford got it out to him from a ridiculous position. But it was interesting what King as well said about him, how we're holding him on the wing and he will probably finish up in the middle at a later point. We'll talk about that later on. But he's I wouldn't have kept him on the wing. I don't think he's fast enough, but he's certainly filling the role. He's just fantastic. It's almost a reminder of what Brayshaw was when he was, just the skills are there when needed. He always seems to be there when needed, and he can hold down a wing. He can hold down all sorts of positions. But
look, I mean, at the moment, he's the best winger in the AFL. He's higher rated than any other winger in the AFL by some margin. The interesting thing about the player ratings is, as I've talked about, what I like is they measure scoreboard impact. But what it doesn't do, of course, is measure influence on a game. And I just thought he was terrific in that last quarter, although ironically it was his lowest scoring player rating quarter. So Max Gawn, he got coaches' votes, and I was a bit surprised because I thought his influence wasn't massive. He was our seventh highest rated player, 15.7. That's for him. That's two quiet games, but still 15.7 player rating points is unbelievable. That's huge. Jake Bowery rounded out, like the next one was, I wanted to highlight partly because just what George was suggesting before, his leadership, he's just slotted straight back into that team. And our defensive unit has looked so much better since he's come back in. And I think a large part of it is because of that leadership and his sort of high footy IQ. Our defensive unit has really improved in the last month, so it's been a real positive. Less positive, there's a bit of talk about Latrell on Demonland, and we'll talk about him tonight as well. There's a question. He's down in the bottom. It wasn't such a shocking game, 2.6, but his ball use was terrible, minus 1.8 equity points. And the one that I highlighted is, it's frustrating really. He's got so much upside, but he's certainly sort of, I don't know, plateauing is maybe not the right word, but Jacob Van Rooyen was our lowest rated player, flat 0. He got 0 rating points in this game. He was negative 6.5, as I said before, for how he used the footy.
Well, it's interesting because there's a question about him later, and some people have some comments saying that he's not playing as badly as maybe stuff like that is indicating, and we'll get into that though.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's interesting. I just think he's got to work out his flaw in his marking technique, I think.
Well, there's these people, they have some theories about it, so we'll talk about it soon. Anyway, sorry to interrupt.
Pressure was really interesting. As I said, I think that, we're a fatigued team. We're gagging for the break. The bye, playing against a team who yet also didn't have a bye. Fortunately for them, they've got a bye this week. We've still got another 2 games to fight our way through. But our pressure was really excellent, and I thought we definitely brought the right intent, unlike last week. We opened our first quarter was 191. Remember, 200's considered elite. They were 186, so it was a really high-pressure first quarter. It started to lag after that, 173 each team in the second quarter. King would have been furious with this third quarter, and this is how it looked. This is what I was saying before. I felt sort of sick in my guts that we were going to run out of gas and lose this game halfway through the third quarter. Our pressure was only 164 to their 184, negative 20 in that third quarter. We fought back a bit in that last quarter, 178 to 169. For the match, it was 77 to 178. So it ended up being not a massively high-pressure game, and I think that was probably – that's a manifestation of the two teams' fatigue levels, I think. But that last quarter, when we needed to bring our best footy, we did 178, 169 plus 9 in that last quarter. Top 5 pressure players, Tommy Sparrow, awesome, unbelievable. I mentioned this last week, he's been in our top 3 highest rated pressure players pretty much every game this season. Maybe there's 1 or 2 that he hasn't been, and probably at least half the games he's been our highest rated pressure player. 28 pressure acts, 61 pressure points. His season average is 57.8. Cade Chandler was second, Jack Steele third, Cozzy fourth. As I said before, he just doesn't do all the beautiful magic goal kicking, all of that skill stuff. He also wins his own footy and applies pressure. And Harry Sharp rounded out the top five. Just to finish up, in some respects, when I was looking at the data, and I really look forward to when Willow puts up the data in the stats file thread on Demoland. I don't feel like my sort of sense of the game is complete until I've read it. But I in my preview last week, I said two of the big keys in this game will be us to win the contest, and that's critical to how all teams play, but it's definitely critical to us. I think I'm right in saying that we haven't won a game where we've lost the contested possession differential this year, maybe one, and that would have been close. And I mentioned in the preview that we really needed to win the pressure, which we didn't. We were one less than them. We needed to win contested possessions to win the game. But we didn't. In this game, the Pies, an ageing team who have yet to have a bye as well, they were +7 for contested possessions. They were +13 for ground ball gets. This is the Pies. The Pies were +7 for post clearance contested possession. And so really, it's amazing we won with those contested numbers. But further to that, I also said in my preview on the Stats File preview pod that critical to us winning will be dominating clearances and scores from stoppages, because that's our one wood. It really is. We're like number one in the AFL or number two. They're way down, like I mentioned that in the preview and also mentioned last week. They're right down the bottom for scores from stoppages and clearances, the Pies. And with Cameron rucking, he's not really like he's certainly not like Briggs, who's going to physically be able to intimidate Maxi. But remarkably, we won this game. They won the number of they had 4 more clearances in total for the game, the Pies. So they actually won the clearance battle just on the raw numbers. Whilst they won that, we were +12 for scores from stoppages. So we won the stoppage score and, we won by 8 points. So you could argue that maybe won us the game. But given that's our one wood and given it was who we were coming up against, they would have been wanting much more than +12 for scores from stoppages. We only scored 7 points from centre bounces, half our season average. That was after last week only scoring 4 points. So it's only 11 points from centre bounces in the last 2 weeks. That'd be concerning of them. It's a good thing they only scored 1 point from centre bounces. That was amazing. So we're averaging 12.5 against for scores against us from the centre bounce. The Pies could only manage 1 point from the centre bounce. We could only manage 7. We're averaging 13.5. Around the ground stoppages, 25 points we scored. Season average is 26.7. They scored 19 points. So +12. But that certainly wasn't, how it would have been drawn up by King. We would have been looking for hopefully +20, +25 from scores from stoppages. Points from turnover was a big one, 51 to 49. So 100 points of the 158 that were scored in total were scored on turnover. I think that as much as anything speaks to the incredible amount of clangers in this game. Points from defensive half for two teams that were both quite good at moving the ball from the back half, really high metres gained. So the Pies had their second highest metre gains ever in the history of since that data's been collected. Only one team this season has had more handball metres gained than us playing against us this season, which is the Swans, who had almost a kilometre handball metres gained in our loss to them. So they really try to run at us. Despite that, they only scored 39 points from the defensive half and we only scored 30. So for all of that strum, it wasn't actually much scoring from the back half. So there's some of the key numbers. Pretty fortunate to win that game given we didn't win clearances. We didn't win contested possessions. We got smashed for ground ball gets and we only scored 12 more points than them from stoppages and only 2 more points from turnover. So, gutsy win. Big credit to the coaching staff, but really big shout out to Selwyn Griffith and the high performance team for having us in any sort of shape to play this game.
Well, promised 10 minutes, gave 19, so you got a bonus 9 minutes there, folks.
Oh, you cut my lunch though. That was like 9 minutes of waffle.
We love it though.
I blame you, Andy. You're in charge.
Let's get into the questions. Lazy writes, would love your thoughts on Stephen King today because he coached a brilliant game. Going in tall was bold. He managed to free up Fritsch when he was having a tough time with Howe. And the decision to chip it around, keep possession and play some tempo with 5 minutes left was a great call. Is there even more to King's coaching than people are crediting? So, George, what did you make of our bold selection to go into the game very tall? And is Stephen King flying a bit under the radar as a coach, or do you think he's getting the right amount of credit for putting a team that many of the pundits thought would be a bottom 4 team to be right there in the mix for finals?
I think we have to give a lot of credit to King because I think not talking about the game itself at this point, about his reading of the way of the future, the way the game's being played. He alluded to it when he was first selected as coach, playing what for fans is a very enjoyable form of football, but it's the nature of winning games that the top 4, top 6 teams all play, all very similar sort of fast ball movement, and that requires particular sorts of player roles, that requires particular sorts of fitness levels to be able to achieve those outcomes. Even around the ground, even around the way that he's utilising players, I think is a dramatic change from what we've seen, certainly under the Goodwin years, that he's prepared to follow the ethos of total football, that you've probably got 6 players in the side that have got a fixed role, and the rest of them you better be able to play somewhere else, and that's what's been really surprising. The transition we're seeing it in players like, we've had Petty, who was slotted for the back line. He's been playing forward. Windsor into the mid, where everybody thought he'd be a permanent winger. Ed Langdon spent time in the back line. Langford, that we now see on the wing, that we thought he'd be much more of a midfielder by this stage. He's developing these players into roles that not that they probably didn't think they'd be in, but also that's just the nature of football. Going talls is another interesting aspect. I had a look at if you look at the top 4 sides in the competition, they all play 3 talls. Every single one of them plays 3 talls, and we're moving to the same path. There's going to be a change, and the reason for playing 3 talls is to stop the interceptors as much as possible, because if the interceptors like the Sicilies and even the Levers are left to their own devices, they will cut you apart. But if you've got a third tall in there just competing against them, making their life difficult, they're not going to be able to be the springboard for the attacks up forward, but also denying your opportunities up forward. So I think other teams will be scrambling at the end of the teams down the bottom of the ladder will be scrambling for additional talls, but you've only got to look at teams like Geelong with Cameron Henry and Shannon Neal, the Swans with Curnow, McDonald and Amati, Freo with Voss, Amos and Tracy, and it just goes on. All the top teams have got 3 talls playing in the forward line, and we're going down the same path. So it's about seeing where the game's going, making sure that we're heading down those similar sorts of paths for success, paths to success that, quite honestly, we didn't see at the start of the year, but he's implemented all those changes. I don't know about the last 5 minutes. I think in the 5 minutes before of any close game, we saw heaps of them on the weekend. I don't think the coach has got much to say about what goes on the ground. It depends on players like Cosy or Harvey Langford pulling out all stops when needed, and I'm sure the coaches are grateful for that. But we saw similar sorts of results in, I think it was 6 other games this round were decided by less than a goal. So, but at the moment, King's certainly flying under the radar, and so are we in a sense, far beyond expectations of all sorts of people.
Just on the talls, I posited it last week, a few sort of theories about the talls, but that's a really good. I hadn't thought of that, George, in terms of minimising the impact of the interceptors, because over the last few years, that sort of half-back intercepting role like Sicily, Lear, have McCartan and Sydney, they've become critical in footy, haven't they, in terms of triggering that sort of turnover footy and marking the back half and then rebounding from there. And in terms of that aspect of it, if that was one of the reasons, which I think is very likely. It's a good point. We had 71 intercepts in this match. They had 63, so a +3. But more impressive, we had 17 intercept marks to their 12. So they +5 for intercept marks. Two of them were Howes and one out against Thinger. So that was impressive. The other reason I was thinking about us going tall is because I think we are fatiguing a bit, is that, that it was likely that we wanted to kick to a contest. We've been doing that. I've been saying that for the last month or so. We are number 2 behind Freo for kicking long to a contest. Sort of logic suggests the more competitive marks you've got in that contest, the better able you are to bring it to the front and then chain out from there, and that's what we look to do. I heard Lever interviewed after the match, and he was asked about the extra height, and he said something really interesting, that another thing I hadn't thought of last week when I was sort of trying to theorise why we'd gone so tall, where a lot of people were really critical on Demonland about how tall we went for this match. Lever was saying, sort of a bit sort of intersecting with what you were saying before, George, about the importance King puts on positional flexibility and players being able to play multiple roles. Lever was saying that the talls, they've got to be able to be flexible enough to play small and to pick up a smaller player. So he was on, Lever had Schultz at different times during the match, not for often, it was namely Colt, but Howes is another of those medium talls who could pick up a smaller player. And Lever was saying that, the talls gives them positional flexibility, allows them to push, for instance, Petty forward. But what's critical in that is their capacity, the talls' capacity to play on small players, because, they're going to have to do so at times. So it certainly worked yesterday in terms of intercept marks. 17 intercept marks is above our season average, which is 14.5. And so, Lever was the standout in that, wasn't he?
Master Chief writes, can we take a moment to appreciate the two Langs? I know a guy in the scouting fraternity, and at the time he told me that Harvey Langford was the steal of that draft and would end up being the best player in that class. For a second-year player, his composure is remarkable. He never seems rushed, makes good decisions with ball in hand, and already looks like he belongs at AFL level. Every week he does something that makes you think we've got a genuine star on our hands. Then there's Ed Langdon. Week after week, he just gets the job done. He runs himself into the ground, provides an option all day, works both ways, and rarely gets the recognition he deserves because he goes about it without any fuss. The bloke is the ultimate team player and one of the most important cogs in the side. One is at the beginning of what looks like could be a special career. The other is a proven professional who sets a standard with his work rate and consistency. Different stages of their career, different roles in the team, but both were enormous on the wing today. The two Langs deserve plenty of love. Garbo writes, are we witnessing the birth of our next star in Langford? If I were to redo the 2024 Super Draft, he would have to be a lock for the top 3 with Reid and Ashcroft. 16 goals from the wing and on track for 30. The rundown tackle on Dacos late was a thing of beauty. If the All-Australian squad actually selected a wingman, he would have to be in there. I'd be interested in your take on how he stacks up. Luann C. from Facebook says, please mention that the handball that Harvey did that led to the Fritsch mark and goal, it was unbelievable. Only real champions have that ability to see the opportunity and to execute under extreme pressure. It was match winning. So, B-Man, there's a lot of people in the footy world singing Langford's praises, and pretty hard to argue. 2-year player, goal-kicking wingman, the tackle on Dacos. You've already talked about him today, but anything else you want to say about him and how good this kid can be?
Well, yeah, and look, if you remember when he got drafted, when we did the preview, I was so big on him. I watched like 2.5 hours of his junior footage after he was drafted, without exaggeration, and I was, you might remember, banging on about, I think he's going to be as good as Bontempelli. That's what I said when he was drafted. I said he's in that league, and nothing that's happened since then has abused me of that thought. He's got competitiveness. His junior footage, he's exactly as one of the questions says, his footy IQ is off the charts. That was so evident watching his junior footage. The thing that I would talked about and why I totally agree if you were to redrew that draft, well, I don't know. I don't know sort of the draft stuff as much, but is that one of the things that most excited about when we drafted him was his physical size and frame. He is as tall as Bont, and I made this point when he was drafted. He was as tall as Bont was when he was drafted. Bont grew 2.5 centimetres, almost 3 centimetres from when he drafted till he got from his draft date to his final height, and probably put on 15, not 15, probably put on 8-9 kilos. Ditto, the same thing will happen for Langford. Unlike, a player like Ollie Wines or, the sort of plug-and-play midfielders that dominated the high-end draft for a long time who, don't get like Horn Francis. He won't get much bigger. He'll be an excellent player, same with Ollie Wines and all of that. But his scope for improvement, Langford, is still untapped because he'll get taller. He's going to grow another centimetre. He as a tall fella, he's 6'2" or something, 6'3", more maybe. In the old, he's going to keep getting bigger and bigger for the next couple of years, like a key position player. When he builds his tank's already pretty good, but that's been the knock on him. He's actually a lot quicker than he looks. As you know, I follow the information really closely on that tracker. He's often in our top 5 for raw speed. He's playing a very high aerobically demanding role, that wing, box-to-box running. When I was just looking at preparing for this, just looking at his numbers, though, I'm a bit surprised that he's just a star. But I expected to see his numbers be hugely better this year than last year. But his player rating last year was 10. His career player rating is 10.11. His player rating in 25 was 10.07. His average so far, or his rating this year is 10.8. And all of his numbers look pretty similar. Like he was slightly less contested possessions. He's playing a different role. He's taking the same number of marks. He kicked 14 goals last year. He's already kicked 16, so he'll romp that home, obviously. And that's been he's kicked more goals of any winger in the AFL. He's averaging 1.2 goals a game. He's averaging 2.1 shots a game. His accuracy is 59.3, which is very impressive for someone who helicopters the ball. He's last year he had 4.5 score involvements per game, 4.4 this year. He's a bloody star. And we haven't even seen sort of close. And Xavier Lindsay, I'm just as pumped about Xavier Lindsay as well. I have equal confidence both will be stars. Langdon is just a marvel. He's just been so brilliant this year. I could not have more respect for him, both as a sort of player and the way he goes about it. In this game, and as George said, he's a perfect example of the sort of player who can now play multiple. I'm sort of thinking of them as utilities, half forwards, wings, half back. They can play wherever needed. But critical to that is the tank to be able to do the defensive and offensive running. In this game, he ran 16.9 kilometres. It is unbelievable. 16.9 kilometres. It was nearly 2 kilometres more than the next best, who was Lipinski, who ran 15 kilometres. So 1.9 kilometres further than any other player on the ground. 100% game time. It is just unbelievable. He's having his best season, I think. Even better than, I don't know about what you guys think, but equally good as 21. And he's playing a different role, that sort of half-back role. He's playing a bit like Gus. He gets into the right positions, but some of his running in this game, I had the binoculars on him at one stage when he was off ball, and he was just, his ability to get from one end of the ground to the other at speed and then repeat that is just something I haven't seen in footy before. But 16.9 kilometres, and he's got to back up in 5 days to play another game of footy. It is just unbelievable.
So think of it. He ran that amount and still laser pinpointed a pass to Cozzy at the death. It's pretty impressive.
Had the wherewithal to calm down and take that option rather than just bombing it long like another player did. And his leadership has been amazing. And, I think that's something that, that when you've got so many players under 50 games, 11 players under 50. And when I was looking at that list, speaking of players who surprised me, is Turner. Turner's only played 45 games and he plays like he's playing 200 games. Yeah. But when you've got so many young players, it puts an extra emphasis on the importance of those senior players. And Langdon's leadership, I think on field, but I get the feeling very strongly off field he's an amazing leader as well. He's clearly got the respect of his teammates, and to boot, he just seems like a terrific fella who I'd love to sit down with and talk to, spend some time with. So
go on a bike ride.
He just seems like an interesting, switched-on fella who's not your average footy head. So takes all sorts to play this game. And both of the Langers have been amazingly. The Bison doesn't seem to have stuck for Langford, but the Langers, they're stars, both of them.
I believe Langdon also cycles to the ground before and after the game.
He does. He's probably done about 50K.
Just to top it off, bit of a cool down warm up.
Yeah. Unbelievable. 16 point. I couldn't believe it. Like, crazy. That's a long way to run, isn't it?
Yeah.
I haven't run that sort of accumulatively over the last decade.
Ollie fan writes, JVR has been criticised a lot for his concrete hands, but to my mind, he's always competing, always presenting and brings the ball to ground. Watching the warm-up, bringing the ball to ground at a pack mark situation is a planned tactic to allow our crummers to go to work. Pate says, perhaps Jefferson could come in for JVR, who had another poor game. And Heath55 replied to that saying, people saying JVR had a poor game or that he's been poor in recent weeks aren't really watching what he's being asked to do. I thought he was good yesterday. 7 marks, plenty of contests that won't show up on a stat sheet, and several crucial defensive spoils where Melbourne was trying to exit defensive 50. Without those interventions, the ball comes straight back in and we're under pressure again. He's playing much higher up the ground than many key forwards and impacting the game in ways that don't always translate to goals and disposals. The concrete hands commentary is also becoming a lazy take that seems to have carried over from last season. He took 7 marks yesterday, including at least a couple in contested situations. He's presenting strongly, leading at the ball carrier and taking marks up the ground. Just as importantly, there are times when he's clearly been instructed to bring the ball to ground rather than attempt the mark, creating opportunities for the smalls at his feet. Sure, he'd like to have that missed shot back, and there's still improvement left in his game, but he's creating opportunities while also doing a mountain of team-first work up the field. The suggestion that Jefferson is anywhere near JVR's current level of output tells me some people are judging players purely off statistics or what they happen to see on a television broadcast. JVR's physical presence, contest work, defensive efforts, ability to bring the ball to ground and impact up the field are all significantly ahead right now. And I'll just add, Pates has recently, just 38 minutes ago in the podcast thread, has answered Heath55, who we just were reading then, and he said, do you know what? I watched the replay and I changed my tune about JVR. Wouldn't say he was outstanding, but he was definitely better than I'd first thought watching live. So there you go. There's some live response to something he said earlier. George, JVR is dividing opinions. Pates wanted him to be dropped. Might not want him dropped anymore. But Ollie Fan and Heath55 are both defending him pretty strongly. Is the criticism of JVR fair, or are they not seeing the bigger picture?
I think we recognise that JVR's got some failings that hopefully he can improve on. But the fact is exactly what he said. We want forwards to compete first and foremost. Marks within 50, particularly contested marks within 50, are almost unheard of these days. It's not how teams score goals. It's not like the old football from 20 years ago where you had people like Lockett's and Dunstall's and that, marking freely in the forward line. You just don't get the opportunities these days. Opposition defences absolutely flood the 50-metre arc. Quite often, Sydney are the best at it. You will see 18 of their players inside the 50. So you're rarely going to get a mark. You're rarely going to get a mark on a lead. And unfortunately, the people who are playing in the forward line don't get too many opportunities. So they've got to do something else as well. They've got to work up the ground, and that's what JVR is doing. It's what we loved about people like Tommy Mack when he was playing in the forward line in the past. It's the work up the ground is just as critical. But like what I was just saying before, it's about stopping those interceptors. That's where they get the drive for their own attacks the opposition. Just think of the Tom Stewarts and the Harris Andrews and the Sicilies. Those are the people who cut you to pieces. If you stop those players, then while you're playing in the forward line, you're actually stopping the opposition kicking goals as well. So the other thing, I think JVR in this game, for example, he had 4 inside 50s off his own boot. He's working up the ground and getting the ball in there as well. He's not just receiving. So that's something that's different in the past. Tellingly, even when we're looking at the last 2 minutes, the person who stopped DeGoey with a tackle, which ultimately led to the ball getting out to Langdon and to Cozzy, was JVR. He was the man who was out there tackling the DeGoey so that the ball did not go down the other end again. That's what you require of forwards. That's what we've really been sprouting about in the last couple of seasons. You need defensive pressures as well from your forwards. He records a tackle, but that's about all. But it also becomes game-saving, those sort of things. So JVR is going to stay in this week. We will talk about Casey. I don't think Jeffo's coming back in any great hurry. It's a different style of game. We all wish we could see the forwards taking high, spectacular marks, but it just doesn't happen these days. It's the work rate that's required in the forward line.
I agree with all of that in terms of the work rate, and I sort of touched on this last week and unpacked it a bit more in the Stats File preview podcast. But last week was the first time I'd really heard King be sort of frustrated and talk with subtext a little bit, and he was clearly irritated with the lack of pressure from the key forwards. That was my take on his sort of summation of the loss to the Giants. And I mentioned this about that connection, which I found fascinating, saying when you lose that pressure inside 50, and he singled out the key forwards, he felt that that's what drove their transition and turnover game. And so our lack of defensive pressure in our forward line actually drove their offense, which I found curious. And so I was not surprised in the least that Jefferson got dropped. And I don't think actually Rue was that great with his pressure against the Giants either, but you're right, George, it was much, much better in this game, noticeable. And the other thing that I thought from that pressure perspective was he halved a couple of contests out on the southern side wing where he got it to the boundary line where, one of those situations where we kick it or it gets kicked long to the wing and you lose that ball, it goes straight back in, and he was able to get the ball to ground and out of bounds on a couple of, just through effort to bring the ball to ground. Pity he missed that goal where I forget who kicked it in, but it was a good mark that he took. It looked like a set play. It might have even been Cos or Latrell but it was a bit of a hack kick. So good that he squared up. He got the first goal of the last quarter, didn't he? My concern, so he won't, there's no sort of sense he'll get dropped. He's not getting dropped for Jefferson, I have to say, at the moment. Jefferson, you're probably right. So what did you say? Optioning your shares? I'm getting less confident about my decision to hold them. But so he's not going anywhere and he's the future. But I do have a concern about just his consistently running under the flight of the ball. Like it just seems to be I don't question his bravery or anything, but in the old days, in the 80s, that sort of player was the player that everyone jumped on and said who doesn't like the packet and smashed into that. And I don't know that's true because, like you said, he throws himself at the contest and he's physical, but he just misjudges it so often. It happened again half a dozen times yesterday where he was in the gun position to mark. And there was one where he just where you really need, I watched a bit of Logan Morris's highlights. He clunks marks where he's it's a 30-70 mark. That's what we need occasionally from Rue for him to go to the next level. I've always said you've got to be patient with the key forwards, and so I'm not. I'm still very keen on JVR's future, but that's a bad habit he's got, and I wish he could get it out of his game.
And we've seen him be able to clunk those marks a couple of times, but. Yeah, just like to see some.
It's funny. It's like he gets that one jump, like Membry. You know how Membry jumps up in one straight up? It's a bit similar, and there were a few. But George is right. Sometimes I wish he goes for mark because there was one where he didn't even bother going for the mark. He just went for the pack and flat-handed it down to the front of the contest where I thought, well, actually just mark that one.
Yeah, but maybe that's because it's been drilled into him.
That's instruction.
That's the instruction.
Yeah,
that's what the way they want to play. So
I said in the preview what I wanted him. I think his best position is centre forward now, is running up the ground, getting those one out in the leads. And as George said, he worked hard in this game. There's no question about that. And that's what, he would have been. His number one KPI for this game would have been his defensive pressure and his ability to run and get up the ground. And so a tick for that. But his ball use was horrendous, as I mentioned before.
Mandalorian writes, what were everyone's thoughts on T-Mac's game? As others have mentioned, the decision to go tall was a bold one, with Petty playing forward and 4 talls rotating through the forward line in Petty, JVR, Myercheck and Kentfield when he wasn't rucking. We needed another genuine key position player down back. I've always been a big fan of T-Mac, and to be honest, I have been baffled by how little we've used him over the past couple of years. He always seemed to be the odd man out, only getting a look in when injuries forced the issue. That said, I couldn't help but wonder yesterday whether the game has finally gone past him. He's been a fantastic servant of the club and owes us absolutely nothing. This is almost certainly his last season, and I'm not sure he looked quite up to the level. The interesting question now is what happens next. With Myercheck likely to miss an extended period, Petty will obviously have to remain forward. If that's the case, is T-Mac still the best option as the third tall defender, or do we need to start looking elsewhere? I'm generally torn because part of me still thinks his experience, positioning and football IQ make him valuable, but another part wonders whether we're reaching the point where sentiment is outweighing performance. Big man, it's a particularly... That's a tough one. I know you, like me, are a big fan of T-Mac. How did you rate his game yesterday, and can he still play a role in this team in 2026, or has the game gone past him?
Look, I thought he was fantastic yesterday. Yeah. I was really surprised at the criticism, or the sort of there was some on
there was a little bit of criticism. It was sort of 50-50 with
people. I thought there were a few things. Is one that it allowed I didn't realise how tall their forward line was. Buller is quite tall as a gap.
The new guy, 46, was quite tall as well.
Yeah. Cameron going forward, and then of course Membry plays tall, and then DeGoey needs to. So
McStay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
The McStay as well. He's tall.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, McStay, exactly. Good thing he can't kick. So the Collingwood fans around me, geez, they were getting stuck into McStay.
Yeah, so was one around me. Yeah.
But I thought that bringing him in was provided the opportunity to put Petty up forward. They clearly wanted to put Petty up forward, and I think a big part of that is what George was saying about wanting to dismantle their ability to just chop us up down back with intercept marking. And he was great. I thought Petty was great, but he doesn't go forward if you don't bring in Petty. If you don't bring in Tom McDonald. I thought his leadership in a big game, a lot of emotion, as I said, 11 players under 50 games, massive golfing experience between the two teams, having a premiership player, 250 gamer, to come in on an occasion like that, both all of the things he does on field, but off field as well, in the preparation, in the lead up, in the rooms beforehand. That is gold. You can't replace that sort of experience. As I said, he's a premiership player. One of my, favourite football memories, and I think it says a lot about him as a professional athlete, is his decision to take that kick after the siren in the 21 flag. I can't believe anyone would criticise him for that. For me, that's what professional footballers do.
What do you mean?
Well, he was a lot of people saying, what was he doing taking the kick after the siren?
Why? Why not?
Well, because it was about him and that sort of stuff.
What do you mean? Anyone would have taken that. I don't. Who's criticising that?
Well, it's people. Yeah. They. But I thought he was he did exactly what I expected him to do. Came in, did a job. Yeah. Didn't make the knock on him is his leg speed. In modern footy, it's all about leg speed. That's why he wasn't. That's why he was not in the out of the side, because he needs if you compare him to Daniel Turner, who's got genuine leg speed for a big fella, he's like the prototype key defender now. Turner. I love Tom McDonald, 250 gamer, but I think he horses for courses. One of the things I love about King is he's clearly making decisions based on who we're playing and week to week. Whereas I think I was probably pretty defensive around a lot of things Goody did. One of which was that he didn't change the lineup
unless he had to because of poor form and consistent.
Yeah, exactly.
Probably 4 weeks too late, poor form.
And as I've said about Tom McDonald, I could not admire him more for the fact that his attitude when he's gone back to Casey. George, when he talks about how Casey performs, says that every thing, he's a pro, total pro. And then so to have a player who you can rely on to come in and do a job, he'll play more senior footy this year, I would expect. His struggle will be he's not, I hate to say, he's probably not best 23 if we've got every running about, but for jobs, King has shown that he'll bring him for task, and who knows. The other thing about just sort of for context is like people were a bit ho-hum about his game. No one mentioned Turner. Turner's had a pretty quiet game. His player rating points in this game to Daniel Turner, who I love Disco, he's fantastic, was 4.9. Trent Rivers was 5.2, so the other defenders. Tom McDonald's rating was 3.4, so at 95% game time. So like that's the other thing, and that's the other thing I would sort of touch on that George has mentioned in previous years, is him playing 95% game time and the way they manipulate time on ground enables other players to have more of a chop out and to not, be on the ground. But you can only really do that if you're a senior player. So, I think it'll be horses for courses. He lacks a bit of leg speed, but he doesn't make mistakes with ball in hand very often. He makes the right decisions. He's reliable, and he's going to go down as a premiership player, 250. Not many Melbourne players have played north of 250 games in the history of our footy club, and huge Tom McDonald fan.
It's really a horses for courses, and I think in this game, in this particular game, when you got Membry and McStay, who aren't sprinters by any stretch of the imagination, he was the perfect sort of fit.
Yeah, exactly.
I suspect we'll see the same thing next week when Ben Mackay plays in the forward line. That you just need a big body, solid.
And it's going to be wet on Saturday, so you're right. He probably keeps his spot. Just while I think of it, shout out to one of my all-time favourite Ds, Oscar McDonald. If he gets selected this week, it'll be his 100th game of AFL footy, and I'll give you the tip. There were plenty of Demonland posters who laughed at me when I said he will get to 100 games of AFL footy many years ago. And, for all those who laughed at me, hopefully he'll get selected this week and I'll have the last week. So well done, Oscar.
And he probably, given the game that they played last week, he probably didn't touch the ball at all because it was never down that end of the ground.
Oh, see, people are still having a go at Oscar.
Well, we didn't have a question about this, but may as well bring it up. Luca Kenfield, what did you guys think of his game? George, I'll start with you.
Yeah, obviously a first game, and so he's got a few butterflies, and that showed up in the first kick for goal.
Yeah. But it was good. It was a good mark, though.
His work. We've got exactly what we wanted out of Kenfield. Strong marks, a couple of strong marks in the game. He leads well. He'll work his way into the system. It's his first game. I like the work that he has had to do to get there in the first place, and I think that he's well ahead of what Jeffo's offering at the moment for the team. So I think we'll see quite a few more games out of him. But it's a good start for him.
In terms of his
ruck, he gets the confidence.
In terms of his ruck work.
I don't. He's a fill in the ruck.
Yeah,
I think we'll talk about who comes in next week and things like that. Look, he can play it. He can do it, and he was certainly touted pre-season to fill some of those roles. But I think that will change during the course of the season. It's nice if you've got someone who's that tall who can take a ruck position if necessary. I just don't think we'll need him as much as what people have thought. But
his rucking I thought was terrible yesterday. It's funny because Roo's is pretty good ruck, but they clearly don't want to gas Roo. So particularly if they're going to get him running up and down the ground, I thought his rucking was actually. There were some significant periods when Max went off for about 10 minutes. I didn't realise he went down off to the ground. I only heard that today. He was out down in the rooms for 10, 15 minutes.
Max,
his shoulders bumped.
Yeah, shoulder injury.
And in that period, that corresponded with the period that I mentioned before. Our pressure rating was 164, and that's when I felt sick in the guts when Collingwood, I thought they were going to kick away. That coincided with Kenfield going into the ruck. I thought it was a serviceable game. Funny sliding doors, though, isn't it? Because he was almost by all accounts, a lock for round one, gets injured, struggles to get back, get over the injury, gets his form back going, kicks, multiple weeks where he kicks 3-4 goals at VFL level, 100% earns his spot, selection integrity, gets selected back in there the week that Mychek gets injured. And, we haven't talked about that, but I felt I just felt sick, and it was a really, it was the longest I've ever can recall them take a player off the team. I can't recall that.
Now that you know that there was quite a serious neck injury that required surgery, it could have been spinal, they didn't know at the time, so they had to be very careful.
Yeah, but the sliding door moment is that, so he does, he's unlucky at the beginning of the season, but that's his opening, because you can play Jefferson and Kenfield if there's no Mychek, because he plays a very similar role to Mychek, physical, one-on-one. He did enough of course he'll get selected next week, and deservedly so. But I just love that mark on the lead that he took, and really good strong hands, and like we've talked about, he hits packs hard, and he didn't take a backward step. He's not going to be intimidated. He's got movie star looks.
That makes all the difference. Yes.
Well, like in a marketing world, it certainly makes some difference. But, so even Collingwood fans were saying, "Geez, he's a good-looking Luca." No, they weren't. I'm rapt for the young fella that he kicked his goal, and I was thrilled that I could yell out "Luca the Lurker."
And that's why none of our listeners can see us.
Yes. We got faces for radio. All right, let's move on. Smurf writes, is anyone else becoming a little concerned about Caleb Windsor's form this season? I'm certainly not writing him off. He's still young, clearly talented, and has plenty of time on his side, but I don't think it's unreasonable to say that after such a promising start to his career, his development seems to have stalled. My biggest concern is he simply isn't getting enough of the footy. Windsor's strengths are his running power, ability to find space, spread from contests, and use the ball well. For a player with those attributes, I'd like to see him having a greater impact on games and finding more ways to get involved. What's also surprised me is his disposal efficiency. When he was drafted, one of the things most often highlighted was his ball use. Yet against Collingwood, he went at just 56% disposal efficiency, the second worst in the side, and his season average is around 65%. For a player whose value comes from his run and ball use, those numbers are a little concerning. I'm starting to wonder whether his best role is a permanent wingman rather than spending time elsewhere. His running capacity and ability to cover the ground seem tailor-made for the wing, where he can become a genuine link player and use his strength to maximum effect. Am I being too harsh, or are others seeing the same thing? And D. Spencer replies, Windsor plays low time on the ground, just 62% today. If he played 80%, he might get 20 touches, which would be fine for his role, which seems to be doing a lot of defensive running cover. He's also managing the toe injury. Whilst every player did a big warm-up pre-game, he only did a little fitness test. Disposal efficiency is always going to be low for an inside mid unless they're a freak ball user or big-time uncontested ball winner dropping across half-back. Wing is probably the easy answer, but it's a bit like sending a key forward down back. You don't do it until you've really decided a player can't hack it. Contested ball is really where I want to see him improve, especially when the ball spills into space and he has chance to body the ball or be a bit stronger over it at least. Would have liked him to have flushed that goal. So George, do you have any concerns regarding Windsor's form? His disposal numbers are down, possibly a result of low time on the ground and the toe injury. Is there genuine cause for concern?
I don't think so, because I think this injury is a little bit understated. It's the sort of thing that at the end of the season you'll find out he's had a broken toe since round 10 or something like that.
He's clearly hampered.
He is clearly hampered. The things that D. Spencer mentioned there, the other about the warm-ups where he does minimal warm-ups, he doesn't need to be putting too much pressure on his foot at the moment. For someone who's a runner, that is critical, and particularly for a fast runner where the acceleration comes from your toes. So he's really labouring under it. The fact that he only played 62% game time, which I think was the third lowest of the team, is pretty damning in terms of it tells you that the fitness people are aware that they can't put him on the ground for much longer than that. They're sort of holding him together to keep him on the field, but that toe injury is really critical. The other thing I noticed on a couple of the warm-ups in the last couple of weeks, he actually doesn't wear boots. He goes on the ground in bare feet, just to stop the pressure on the toe. So I think it was telling again in this game where he actually broke out of the centre at one stage, got 2 bounces, heading straight for goal, 40 metres out, couldn't kick the distance. His kicking's being affected, his running's being affected. It's not surprising, and there's a fundamental underlying cause, and I don't think it's a lack of form.
Yeah, and I agree with all of that. And just a couple of comments is, one of the issues, I think, at least with the way that footy is looked at by the media and then sort of by extension fans, is every week is a game in a bubble. Is that what happens is you tend to forget what's happened this season. It wasn't that long ago against Hawthorn, that week everyone was talking about the media saying that he was in the top 2 most influential midfielders in the AFL in terms of scores from the midfield when he was in there. And, he was critical to how we were scoring up into that Hawks game. Now, that coincides with his injuries. He went out, he's come back in. So, we're quick to forget how damaging he was and how important he was to our setup. The other thing is they're only running with 4 midfielders. He's one of them. So 62% game time puts, that's an interesting number. The other thing, George noted about the, 62% game times indication from the high performance team that, that's about what his load can manage at the moment. But doesn't it say something about what's the alternative? He should be dropped. Let's put him back to Casey. The point is that we want to win games. We want to we're 5th on the ladder. The ladder doesn't lie. We're way past the stage of the season where, we've played all the teams. There's no one we haven't played, I think.
Yeah, there is Geelong, Adelaide.
Geelong, the teams we haven't played, but we're played enough of the top teams and the bottom teams to get a sense now of where teams are relative to each other. And the reality is we're 5th on the ladder, equal points with the 4th and 3rd. That's just a fact. It's not a supposition. He's been critical to that. We want to keep winning. It shows how important his run is, even when he's not performing to the level he was earlier in the season. We can't afford to drop him, despite he's clearly, as George said, he's obviously hampered. That you don't need to be a bloody surgeon or physical expert to see that. So to me, it tells a story about how we're very we've got a lot of injuries. We need every player on deck, and he's fulfilling that role.
Lefty writes, great win today. There's nothing better than beating Collingwood, especially in the fashion that we did, and making their supporters sit through every last second of it. Do you think it might be time to give Trelly a run in the 2s to build some confidence and regain a bit of touch? We all know he has the potential to be an excitement machine, and I'm sure his time will come. But right now, he just doesn't look up to AFL level. Too often he gets caught holding the ball because he's trying to do a little too much instead of taking the first and simpler option. I know the counter-argument is probably the Casey cupboard is pretty bare, but even Laurie looks like he offers more at the moment. We can't keep picking someone purely because they might produce the occasional freakish moment. A consistent contribution has to count for something. Alex, no fancy name, replies, unless Trelly needs a rest, keep playing him. What he lacks is a feel for the match at AFL level, which he won't learn at Casey. If a couple of moments go his way, we'd be talking about a breakout game, and it will come. Maybe in a knockout final, I'd see dropping him, but we're building as a team, and the risk-reward equation is positive, big man. Trelly split the room on D-Milan. Lefty reckons it's time to send him back to Casey, but Alex, no fancy name, says the only way to learn is by playing. What's your take? Persevere or give him a spell?
Persevere, 100%. Yeah. I mean, it's really interesting. I fully get the concerns people have with Latrell, and some of his kicking and decision-making on the weekend were poor. And, some of his errors are really glaring, aren't they? Because he takes game on. He's been told to take the game on, by the way, by his coach. Yeah. So he's doing what he's been told. And you might remember, that's the thing, you either ignore what the club says or you don't. But I heard multiple players and the coach King say during the week is that he's tried to free up the players this week and told them to go back to playing on instinct. And he said he deliberately took a step back from what he called overcoaching the previous week. He's been encouraged to take the game on. So he won't be in trouble for getting pinged from his coach, from the fans he will. So, but I get it in terms of that stuff. But I really think that, in terms of his position in the side, I really think that it's, and whether he should be dropped or not, I think a big factor is the extent to which someone feels the running he does is critical to King's game plan, because I just think that's ignored, is that our game plan is, as I've talked about, everyone's talked about, ad infinitum, is based on running. And he is, I've run through them, but, Chin, Langdon, increasingly Langford, Sharp, of course, and Latrell, they're critical to our game plan. We cannot win games of footy if we do not have those runners. So, sure, if you drop him, no worries. Who's going to cover those kilometres at the speed he covers? People talk about Laurie. It's just Henderson isn't going to be able to do it. So who comes in and gives that defensive spread or offensive spread to replace that? And if they're not going to more than replace it, I don't see the point. The same thing happened. We debated this on the podcast. Famously, Andy, you were saying that Cos should be traded and he needs to be kicking goals as a small forward.
Cos? I never said that.
Cos,
I want you to find the tape. I want you to find the tape where I ever said Cos should be traded.
If you go back on Dean Moore, I'll check the tape.
Yeah, you do that or I'll take you to court.
But if you go back to Demonland, there were plenty of – the consensus was early on in Cos' thing, he should go back to Casey because he wasn't getting enough possessions, he wasn't kicking enough goals. But clearly the best thing for his development as an AFL footballer was to play AFL football. He played in the grand final the following year and had a fantastic 21 season. That doesn't happen unless they put the games into him at AFL level. What's Latrell going to learn back at Casey?
No.
I mean, he's not – all of the stuff, sure, he might get a bit of confidence. He doesn't need confidence. But it's part of the problem. He's probably overconfident, isn't it? So, just like Cos's KPIs in his first season were inside 50 pressure and tackles, not goals, Latrell's KPIs would all relate to his running. So, goals and disposals would just be icing on the cake. But things like distance he covers, defensive and offensive spread, how many contests he gets to, distance covered at speed, adherence to the patterns he's supposed to run, that's what he will be judged on. We don't know all of that stuff, so we've only got half the information. We do know that he keeps getting selected, so clearly King wants him in the team. What's he going to do going back to Casey? That run that he does isn't going to be – who's going to replace that? Like maybe Laurie, Henderson, Fitzgerald will only just cover it, but definitely not cover the speed that he runs at. No chance. They're just not as good as athletes. And he might get a bit of a freshen up going back. So maybe he could work on his forward craft and skills, but not at AFL intensity, at VFL intensity. And then go back in and suddenly it's at a higher level. If he goes back to Casey, the running he'll have to do at Casey is way, way less than he will have to do at AFL level. He will have to do kilometres after the game in order to keep his running loads up. So it's all about development. I think if King and his team think the AFL is the best place to fast-track Latrell's development, I'm happy for him to be in the ones.
I think the problem for Latrell is again fatigue. That I think what's his game time this week was high 30s, low 40s. It was only second to Myercheck. So, again, the high-performance team aren't putting him on the ground because they know he's really struggling at the moment. It's easy to forget that he was playing Sandful seconds just 6 months ago, where there's a huge jump to AFL level, and again, he's a first-year player feeling the heat at the moment. He's had one rest already. I suspect a rest might be
That's exactly
more
managing.
Yeah, managing more than he's not being dropped for form. He's being dropped because he actually needs it, and the numbers are starting to show that. Where he was caught on the weekend, he was able to get away at the start of the season, but the fatigue's cutting in. he hasn't got that extra yard, that sort of thing. He knows what he can get away with, but the body's not doing what he's telling it to do at the moment. So I suspect he might get a week's rest, particularly off 5 days coming into this game.
Yeah.
So
I reckon that, even if they managed him for 2 weeks, then you got the bye, and then they probably won't do that. But I agree, manage him if they feel he needs it. It was 48% game time. That's pretty low, isn't it?
That's pretty low, yeah.
And I will just remind you, big man, in Cozzy's first year, there was no reserves in 2020. So I would like a retraction.
So he couldn't get dropped. Is that you're out for wanting him bloody kicked out of the club? Traded.
Ollie fan says, I love our coach, but I thought allowing Gawn to come off after the first 10 minutes was a big mistake. He was dominating, and we had established a 2-goal break on the back of it by allowing him to come off. He put a first gamer up against the seasoned ruckman who turned the stoppages around and allowed them to close the gap. I thought it was a mistake. So, George, was the timing of the call to rest Gawn early when he was absolutely dominating wrong? And I mean, the guy does need a rest, and he is banged up, as was mentioned. Did King get that wrong, or we got to preserve Max, and that's the way to do it?
We've definitely got to preserve Max, and Max is really struggling. I was talking to the guys before the program. I was sitting somewhere up near the top of the MCC area, and the next step up was Everest Base Camp. It was that high at the ground, but you can see exactly everybody and how they're moving across the ground rather than down at ground level. Max is really struggling to even cover the ground at the moment. There were two ruck contests that I counted where he actually didn't make it to the ruck contest.
Which is unheard of.
Which is unheard of, absolutely unheard of. Max runs everywhere. He's just struggling. In this game, Max took no contested marks at all. And that, again, is unheard of from Max. Post-match, we've heard that he's carrying a shoulder injury, which may have been the reason for his coming off in that first 10 minutes, if that's when it's occurred. But at the moment, the other thing that is unheard of from Max, twice in this game, Cameron pushed him off the contest. And again, that just doesn't happen. It was the same thing that happened with Briggs last week. So, yeah, he's really struggling to stay in the game. We'll talk about the ins and outs next week, but I think he needs the help from Heath. And I think he's got to be managed a bit better in game, even if he doesn't like it. Cox up at Sydney has rested Grundy because he realises how critical he is to the overall performance of the team. I don't know that we'll convince Max to take a week off, but instead of doing, as we did with Heath, 80-20, maybe it needs to be 20-80 in this coming week. And again, with a 5-day break, this is the perfect opportunity to give him at least an in-game rest. But we've still got a long way. We've still got 10 plus rounds to go into the season plus finals. So yeah, you don't want to be breaking Max at this point of the season, because then it will be Max Heath in the ruck.
100%, totally agree, and you're spot on about his sort of, well, I guess his inability to, how less effective he was with his marking and his tap work. But he also gave up. I couldn't believe, he'll be spewing about that one, that Buller shoved him off out of when's the last time that happened? In a marking contest, that one-on-one marking contest. It was actually at a critical time in the match where Buller marked it and gold. He couldn't raise his right arm to contest that, Max, in that contest. It was right below me. You don't see that very often, him getting beaten in a one-on-one. And Buller's only, 20, he's a young fella, isn't he, Buller?
Yeah.
And then that sort of also speaks to what I was noting before about the ruck contest. So it was 52 rucks hit-outs to 23 for the match, 15 hit-outs to advantage. They sharked us brilliantly. They had first possession 40 times and first possession clearance 82. They had more clearances than us, as I said before, 4 more clearances in total. That's really unusual numbers for Maxi, and it's your point well made, George, about he was clearly sort of struggling physically. I thought it's a big test in some ways for King, isn't it? In terms of he's such a big personality, Maxi is such a talisman, but the idea that he's making the decision about whether he's playing.
We don't know that. We don't know that. That's a bit unfair, but
maybe, but perhaps, but still, he's not going to be dropping him, is he?
No, I don't. I don't think so.
Or resting him.
I'm sure Max also wants to be right in the frame of that All-Australian.
No, of course. Do you mean unfair on Max? Or
no, I don't think we don't know whether it's Max making the call, although we can probably guess that he'd be having quite a big
except for the fact I've heard King say several times, Max is not an easy man to say he's so.
Well, we know Max will walk straight into the fire. So, Go Lordy says, I was constantly disappointed by skill errors today for passes going to the opposition, handballs at teammates' feet or behind them. Is that a reflection of tiredness from having no bye yet or the pressure being exerted? El Diablo 14 asks, how worried are we for the next 2 games? The team must be cooked by now and no bye is diabolical. Spirit of Norm Smith says the D's have not had a bye. Some teams have already had 2. Did the AFL ever review the fixture to address such anomalies? Well, we've spoken about the fixture and our disadvantage as a result. We spoke about that last week. Go Lordy noticed plenty of skill errors today and he's wondering if fatigue is starting to show. We're able to run out games, but perhaps our opposition was also cooked and that's why they couldn't go with us right at the end. How cooked are we? Lack of a bye and coming up on a 5-day break could be a disaster.
Clearly we're fatigued. It's like some of the skill areas and decision making, and if you watch, I watched that game last night, knowing the result. I watched the replay. There were some pretty horrendous mistakes by us. One being that Cozzy thing where he kicked on the full. He could have kept running. He had no one between him and the goal. He was just gassed. He said afterward he doesn't know what he was thinking in answer to the question, what were you thinking when he played on? He literally said, I don't know what I was thinking.
Oh, the play from the mark or the kick for goal when he was running.
Mark. And just on that Cozzy goal, where he kicked it on the full. If you watch that replay, there's a brilliant tap from Maxi that flips that out too. Just a magic bit of footy. Both teams were clearly fatigued. They were both gassed. There's no doubt about it. The number of clangers was nuts. Dacos is the best kick in the AFL. Some of his kicking was appalling. It was helpful actually because every time I yelled out "Go Cos," Dacos in that first half did something terrific, and everyone yelled at me "Go Dacos." But they all my Pies brethren in the stand were pretty quick to shut up when Dacos turned it over as often as he did. Both teams were clearly gassed. Kudos to the high performance for the condition we're in. 5-day break is not optimal. It's actually lucky, to be honest, we're playing Essendon, isn't it? Essendon.
That's what I thought last time.
They're off a 6-day break, I think, aren't they?
No, they played Sunday too, didn't they? Oh, no, sorry, you're right. 6-day break, of course.
Yeah.
6-day break, and that was a pretty tough game too. So we're lucky. We're well lucky we're playing Essendon. How are we going the next 2 games? If we can beat Essendon and lose if we go 50-50 the next 2 games, I'll be more than well pleased with that. It's going to be a big ask to go to Adelaide to beat the Crows who are up and about.
Yeah.
And,
it's going to be tough on that one.
Like George, I would like to see them, really rest a lot of players and bring players in. I often wonder why they don't do that more often, and certainly Goody didn't do it at all, but bring in, I guess it's not like we've got a surfeit of players at Casey banging the door down to play AFL, but, talk about Matthews, he's not ready. Talk about Xavier Taylor, he's not ready. You don't, that's not, selection integrity is important. So you don't bring in players, but you got, we'll talk about it, but Fitzgerald and, I don't think Henderson's really, you take Latrell out to replace him with Henderson, that's not going to progress much, is it? So, I hope they definitely look to manage players.
We'll talk about that.
Weeks. So I don't know much choice, will they?
Casey's 2-game winning streak came to an end at Casey Fields, surrendering a 27-point first quarter lead to fall to Collingwood by 12 points. The Demons were outstanding early, dominating territory and stoppages through Max Heath, Joel Fitzgerald and Jack Henderson, kicking 5 of the game's first 7 goals. However, after Ricky Menther's major late in the opening term, Casey managed just 3 goals, 5 for the remainder of the match as Collingwood gradually took control. The Magpies overwhelmed the Demons around the contest, finishing with a commanding +20 clearance advantage and +27 inside 50s, exposing a drop in work rate and ball use that saw Casey's early buffer evaporate. Lucas Cook was Casey's standout performer with 30 disposals and 11 marks across half-back, while Heath, 22 disposals, 18 hit-outs and 7 clearances, continued his strong push for AFL selection. Fitzgerald, 34 disposals, Henderson, 28, and Miller-Bergman, 28, found plenty of the footy, but the Demons struggled to maintain their intensity across 4 quarters in the absence of key leaders Tom McDonald and Riley Bonner. Despite the disappointing result, the continued emergence of Cook and the strong form of Heath remain significant positives heading into next Saturday's clash with Essendon at Casey Fields. George, anything to add about the D's listed players and their performances?
Not really. I thought it was interesting when, particularly in the first quarter, Heath, Henderson and Fitzgerald in the mid absolutely dominated the opposition. And as soon as the ball was handed over to the Casey players, the Casey listed players, the drop-off was absolutely dramatic. And we saw that over the subsequent 3 quarters. Unless those 3 were in the midfield at the same time, turnovers, constant turnovers, failure to kick and hit targets was just the order of the day, and Collingwood eventually ran out winners. Learned a couple of things. Cook is going to be someone special for the back line. He is just a natural footballer, a natural defender who knows how to read the ball magnificently, read the play. I think it was 30 possessions or thereabouts for the game. He's tall. He's got absolutely everything we need. If he continues on this vein, he will be playing in the seniors at some point during this season. Particularly when you've got an ageing Tom McDonald, for example, who's probably going to need replacing come year end. This is exactly the sort of player that we need for the future. The future may not be all that far away. Mapley was the other interesting one. They played him in the ruck a little bit more this week. I don't think he's got a future as a ruck. He's 200 centimetres, and that's not quite tall enough. I don't know how tall the Collingwood ruck was in this game, but Mapley looked completely overwhelmed with the height that he was giving away, and also the body shape. I think he'll develop more likely as a forward rather than as a ruck. Jeffo was Jeffo again. He was even playing in the back line at one stage. Which was strange.
Not a good sign, is it?
No, it's not a good sign.
And it didn't feel like they did it to shore up their defence. It felt like they did it to get into the game.
Yeah. It was just a typical Jeffo game. I think he got one goal out of the game, and that was a result of Cook streaming down the middle of the ground and nailing it to him, where he almost couldn't avoid not marking it. So, the Casey players are just a level below what's required to be serious at this level of the competition. But it's nice that we picked up a couple of very good players. Henderson and Fitzgerald are probably, they're putting their hands up to be selected for this week, particularly with the short turnaround. So it'll be interesting to see whether that happens. But there's not a great deal of not a great number of other players putting their hand up in any way, shape or form other than those couple.
I wasn't particularly impressed with Fitzgerald's game, at least not compared to the previous week. He got a lot of possessions, but a lot of them were sort of junk possessions. And, it was a fairly average performance given that we had a pretty impressive first sort of quarter and a bit.
That's it for Casey. All right, let's get on to changes. Pates writes, with our short break, I was wondering whether we should expect quite a few changes. Obviously, Checkers will come out, but for the sake of fitness and tactics, could we see Jefferson for JVR? I think that's a no-no. Matthews for Latrell and Heath for Checkers. Well, given King flag, Max is pretty banged up. Big man, followed by George, your changes for this week.
Well, I'm sorry, Pates. None of them except for Heath. I can't see Jefferson coming in for JVR, not in.
We don't
except for the alliteration of the thing. But no way, not a chance. Matthews comes in for Latrell, Fitzgerald maybe, or if you take Latrell out, you got to find 15 kilometres running at speed. That's what, and so if Fitzgerald can do that, maybe he's a chance. But, Matthews is a fair way off it, to be honest. He's, and he hasn't got the tank to do. He's a small forward, not a high half forward. Will they bring players in? I mean, it's part of the problem of having a very long injury list, and then Onley isn't ready, Berry's not ready.
Who replaced Cully in the team? Who would you say has replaced Cully? Yeah,
Cross was because the player who came in and playing a similar role, wing, push forward, utility type. But there isn't really an equivalent. I mean, Onley, I think Onley.
No, I was just thinking Fitzgerald maybe getting a game. I know you said he didn't play as well.
But, role, but I do hope that. I mean, the sort of one of the factors this week is going to be wet. It's going to be wet and windy on Saturday. Yeah. So, bring Heath in, but there's a risk of going too tall.
Well, that's exactly.
So, look, I hope they do manage players. Obviously Checkers out. Losing AMW is shocking. So maybe they will bring Fitzgerald in. Henderson probably deserves a go ahead of Fitzgerald, but, it's not a popularity contest, I guess. But, outside of that, as George has said, it's not like there's suddenly all of these players. I can't see JVR, selection integrity to me says that JVR shouldn't get selected on the basis of that performance, to be honest. So they won't have done much work in the lead up. They won't do much running this week. And so, maybe they won't make too many changes, but definitely I want to see them. I personally would I would manage Maxi if it was me, and I'd bring in Heath and give him a full go in the ruck in the wet. In fact, I think he would actually be good in those conditions because he's not as sort of tall and they're not particularly strong in that space. So, it'll be interesting.
We always play them in the wet.
Yeah.
We played them at the G a couple of years ago.
It was funny. King was asked about playing them again, having had a great win. Last time we had a great win and now we're playing Essendon again. Yeah. What's the difference, he was asked. And he was a bit cranky. He was like, his answer was, well, the big difference was we'll be playing at the MCG.
We can't play every game at the G, though. George.
Unbeaten.
Yeah, I think Heath, given his performance at Casey, and he was magnificent in the ruck when he was doing the job. I think he's the logical one to come in. It enables Petty to stay in the forward line. Yeah. It enables JVR to stay in the forward line, and it enables Max to get some decent break, hopefully, in this game of some sort. Not dropping Max, but at least
20 or
whatever it might be. But you've got to and King has said, he wants to manage him during the season. Well, this is the perfect opportunity to implement that.
Wait, before you go on, can we play with Heath, Kenfield, Max Gawn, T-Mac, and all the other, Checkers is coming out, but JVR and...
if we can, it's against Essendon.
It's against
because they're not going to exploit our run. Like they're I don't know, they're just running up and down on one spot. The other player, maybe the consideration that we haven't talked about, who hasn't set the world on fire, but actually they've been playing him as a halfback, and is maybe Ricky Mentha might be opportunity. He hasn't really set the world on fire, but
no.
Yeah. So
go ahead, George.
Still a long way from it, I think. But so if Latrell needs to be rested, I think Fitzgerald Henderson is the logical option there.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, well, let's get into the preview. Coming off a massive King's birthday win, the Demons now face a completely different kind of challenge and one they really can't afford to stuff up. Melbourne host Essendon at the MCG on Saturday, and on paper, it doesn't get much more straightforward than this. The Bombers are the competition's whipping boys right now, sitting at the bottom of the ladder and carrying an injury list that reads like a casualty ward. It's been an absolutely brutal year for the Dons with the injury toll, and at times this season they've barely had a recognisable side to put out. But here's the thing, and this is what should make every Melbourne fan quiver in their boots. They need no reminder that the one team that Essendon has beaten this year is us. And back in Gather Round, they came out and put us away, and that result still stings. The Bombers know they can beat this Melbourne side, and you can bet they'll come into Saturday with absolutely nothing to lose and everything to prove. And the D's cannot afford to be the only team in the competition to not only lose once, but to lose to Essendon twice in a season. That would be embarrassing, and frankly, it would raise serious questions about where this group is at. And after the emotional high of Monday and off a 5-day break, the focus needs to snap back quickly, because if there's one thing we know about this competition, it's a complacency against a side with nothing to lose can bite you in the bum. And Singer writes, "Please tell me we will beat Essendon. I just could not cope with losing to them again. If we are the only team to lose to that rabble not only once but twice, then we have no right to be playing finals or wildcard weekend or whatever it's called." George, followed by B-Man, your preview of our return match against the Bombers.
Yeah, Singer's absolutely right. The Bombers are at the bottom of the bottom. If you watched the Essendon Carlton game, and that was an absolute parody of skill.
Would have loved to have them to beat Carlton.
Yeah, and it was just ridiculous. Both sides were just as bad as each other. It was only exceeded by the previous week's game where Essendon plays Richmond, and it was even worse. But their skill levels, Essendon skill levels, are just appalling. They've got three players that we need to worry about. Durham, who is playing good football. Merritt is avoiding contest at all costs, but he's still highly skillful. And Caddy, if he gets his tail up, we've got to be worried about up the forward line. The rest of the side is pretty ordinary. So it's almost like saying there's no point in beating Collingwood if we lose to Essendon, given their state in the competition. So it's a big opportunity again for us, especially after the Collingwood win, where we sit 2.5 games clear of 11th. Here's an opportunity to extend that even further, and almost if a win in this game will almost guarantee that we'll finish up playing finals with a couple of games against other bottom sides that you would think would be guarantees. But we've got to turn up, put them to the sword relatively quickly. Don't let them get the confidence, get their tails up, and the game will flow naturally. But we're just too highly skilled compared to what they've got.
This is like, it makes me sick, this game as well.
Imagine me.
I can't, the idea of us losing this game is just too much for my head. But it worries me that it's going to be wet. They'll try to keep the ball off us, which actually maybe won't be such a bad thing. It's wet, because their ability to keep the ball off us with chip marking is just what they did in Adelaide, even though it was wet there too. They'll probably try to do that. I think we're a bit gassed to press up on them. I think George is spot on. We sort of get in front early. We won't take it easy after last time. In terms of the ratings and stuff, as George said, they're the bottoms really. Their overall rating is minus 23.7. We're plus 5.4. But if you go on Wheelo ratings, there's a preview of each game, and they have the sort of categories of team stats. Generally, like last week, there's a split. The Pies were better defensively. We're better than attack. In this lineup, in every one of there's about 20 different categories: time and forward, half time, possession, all the attacking total points from turnover, and all the defensive stats at the high level. Is we best them in every single one. Except one data point, which was points from stoppages. We're both defending 39 teams are scoring 39.1 points from us for stoppages, but every single other one we smash them in. So, for instance, scoring from stoppages, they're only scoring 28.3 from stoppages. We're scoring 40.2 from stoppages. That is nuts. We're averaging 97.9 points a game, which has gone down a bit actually. They're only 75, 52 points from turnover to 42, and on it goes. So if we lose this game, maybe we won't be doing the podcast next month.
Yeah. Could be. All right, that's where we're going to leave it there for tonight. We could be back in 2 weeks time. Look out for Big Man's Stats Files preview podcast on Friday if you enjoy a deeper dive into the stats that matter in the lead up to the Bombers game. Also, don't forget you can check out my interview with Tom Sparrow that I did a couple of weeks ago, wherever you're currently listening to this podcast. And thank you to our 5-star reviewer on Apple Podcasts. That was a thank you to Engie. And thank you to our commenter from Facebook, Luann C. And thank you to our Demonland posters who submitted questions and comments. They're an integral part of the show. So thank you to Lazy, Master Chief, Garbo, Olifan, Pates, Heath55, Mandalorian, Chief, D. Spencer, Lefty, Alex, No Fancy Name, Go Lordy, L Diablo 14, Spirit of Norm Smith, Singer, Rue Beauty, Go D's, and Doug Reamer. Thank you to my co-hosts, George and B-Man, and thank you to you, our loyal listeners. Don't forget, leave us a 5-star review and a comment on Apple Podcasts, and we will read it out and give you a shout-out on the next show. Go Demons.
Go Red Leggers.
It's a grand old flag. It's a high-flying flag. It's an emblem for me and for you. Well, it's the emblem of the team we love, the team of the red and the blue. Every heart beats true for the red and the blue as we sing a song for you. Should old acquaintance be forgot, keep your eye on the red and the blue. We're the team played fine in the year 39. We're the team that no one can lick. Find us there after the final bell with the spirit of 1926. Every heart beats true for the red and the blue as we first sing this song to you. Should old acquaintance be forgot,